All right. Hey, well, welcome to Authentic Leader Live. Uh, Thank you for joining us today. Actually, I did this last week and I was not happy with the result. So, this is actually a re recording of last week's Authentic Leader Live. So, we're just going to record it again and we're going to broadcast this again. And that's how you get things right. That's how you become better, right? Do things over again. So, welcome to Authentic Leader Live. Today, it's a double dog dare for emerging leaders. We're going to talk about the 2 Ds for emerging leaders of high performing teams. Now, when we talk about emerging leaders, we're talking about new managers who have been recently promoted and now realize that managing their team is very different from what they thought that it would be. Emerging leaders, they're also future leaders who have aspirations for leading teams. The Authentic Leader Show is the podcast for emerging leaders as they transform into authentic leaders of high performing teams. Now, double dog, it stands for 2 things. It's both for discipline and delegation. And when I'm talking about discipline, I'm not talking about like punishing people for not performing. I'm also not talking about the version of discipline where we say it's not committing to a worthy goal, which of course I subscribe to. You should, but that's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today when we talk about discipline, we're talking about discipline as in principles of leadership. Then the other D is for delegation. So, what we're doing really here is that we're combining all of the disciplines of authentic leaders with the discipline of delegation. Authentic leaders, excuse me, emerging leaders, they need to assign work. And the reason they don't assign work many times is they just don't have a framework for doing so. They're not really considering the reasons to delegate, even thinking, what would be the reasons that they need to delegate or delegate more, or why aren't they delegating? Even thinking about what is keeping them from delegating. And then why is delegation failing for them? They're not taking time to look at a delegation failure and realizing that this is what has caused it to fail. The tools that emerging leaders use include applying some I'm getting caught up on my words today. The tools emerging leaders include in applying simple delegation frameworks. They apply things like the 4 phases of delegation. There's a delegation process and even giving feedback about delegated work. Framework creates structure, and that's why we create these frameworks so that there is some structure, there's some guidance, and something for emerging leaders to follow. Additional frameworks are the disciplines of authentic leaders. And I have been teaching emerging leaders these disciplines of authentic leaders for literally decades. But before we go too far, I do want to let you know that I am hosting a summit specifically for new managers and emerging leaders. This is what it's going to do. It's going to empower emerging leaders with foundational team leadership tools and skills that really transform them into what I call authentic leaders of high performing teams. Because don't leaders deserve to lead high performing teams? And additionally, don't members of teams deserve to be on high performing teams? And that's what we're all about. Why would you accept anything else? I need your help, though. I need your help to fill only 10 spots for this summit. To get some details and to learn more, I would love to have a conversation with you and share with you. Or if you know someone who may benefit from this, you can sign up for a free confidential phone call where I can share with you the details. I can learn a little bit more about you and what you need to accomplish. You can do that at AuthenticSuccessOnline.com/interest. Now, emerging leaders are frustrated and surprised that managing their team isn't as easy as that they thought that it would be. I know that I definitely experienced that when I first was promoted to a what I call a title leader role. Until they uncover some key principles, some starter strategies and systems and tools, these leaders, they will continue to struggle to lead their team to high performance. So today I'm sharing the connection between some of those key disciplines of authentic leaders with how they are applied to effective delegation. Now, one discipline of authentic leaders is setting the direction for the team. Of course, the team needs to know what direction are they headed and how are they going to get there. Now, we don't have time to go into all of the detail of that today, but what we will talk about is the important aspect of setting the team direction and how having the team involved in creating that direction. It's critically important. Simply, the team's direction includes things like the vision, the mission, core values, team norms, those sorts of things. The team also needs to have their fingerprints all over the team direction. They need to be a part of creating the team direction. Having an established team direction also is an important and critical tool for emerging leaders when delegating work to their team. Any work or task that's delegated to a team member should be clear to both you, the person who's delegating the work, and the person who's actually doing the work. How does this work help to achieve the team direction? It should be clear on both parties there. Unless the work clearly connects to the team's direction, perhaps you and the person doing the work should question why this work is even being done in the first place. Another discipline of authentic leaders is decision making. A fundamental skill that emerging leaders need is to be able to push more decision making into the team. The the leader should not be making all of the decisions. And if you feel like you're making too many of the decisions for the team, perhaps you need to start thinking about how can you push more of that decision making into the team. But a lot of emerging leaders don't know how to do that. The team simply should be making more decisions about the work that they do. Now, this is connected to delegation because as a team member is trusted with bigger work projects and tasks, they are also trusted with increasing their decision making authority. Newer team members without much experience should have lower levels of decision making. They may need to check in with you before making a decision about the work that they do. As a team member gains experience and demonstrates their skill at performing tasks, they can be trusted with more independent decisions with about how, when, and where they perform their work. The epitome of all decision making is when you ultimately have fully delegated the authority to the team member who has over time demonstrated their skills, experience, and motivation to do the work that they do so that they are making decisions without you. Another key discipline is communication. And communication, of course, is another discipline of authentic leaders. Now, this is one discipline that everyone continues to improve, or at least should. Not that there aren't amazingly skilled communicators out there, but the most effective leaders recognize that they always need to be learning and improving how they communicate with others. So it's no surprise that communication is also tied to how to delegate work to your team. If it's important enough to do, it's important enough to make sure that the person who is doing the work understands the result that needs to be produced. That comes from effective communication. A successful delegation starts with clearly communicating the necessary results through dialogue so that the manager and the team member doing the work are both equally confident that they fully understand the work that will be done. That all happens through communication and effective dialogue between both parties, of course. Now, we really can't talk about delegation without also talking about the discipline of accountability. It's not uncommon for emerging leaders to want to avoid the confrontation of holding their team members accountable. I mean, it's understandable. I mean, who wants that conflict? But when delegating work, it doesn't have to and really shouldn't involve conflict if you delegate correctly. Now, as I mentioned in the last discipline of communication, as long as you communicate the result clearly, it sets up for how you hold the person who's doing the work accountable. There are a number of reasons that delegation fails, which I don't have time, of course, to go into here, but establishing a deadline for the work to be completed, it's a very common one. I ask the person doing the work when the work can be done, given all the other work and responsibilities and priorities that they have. Now, what I've found is that when a person doing the work has a say in the work that has a say in when the work will be done, it significantly increases the likelihood that the work will be completed on time. And of course, if the deadline is missed, it's simply a manager asking the person who's doing the work, why was the deadline missed? At that point, it's an opportunity now to coach the team member towards improving deadline determination for next time. Now, I know that this is somewhat simplistic. It's a little more technical than that, but I'll spend more time on that in a future podcast. Or if you can't wait, of course, you can schedule a free strategy call. I'll be more than happy, and I'm glad to share with you all of the details that go into how to hold team members accountable, especially when it comes to delegation. Now, the last discipline I'll share here is feedback. It's a very important one, and one that basically all managers need to be able to do. If no one has shared this with you, it's a bona fide part of your job as a manager to give prompt and regular feedback to your team. Again, this is a much larger topic that we don't have time to dive into today. When it comes to your team performing delegated work or task, you owe it to your team to provide feedback about the work that was completed, especially for those new team members on your team who are learning a new skill and maybe just gaining new experience. I start all of my feedback with what went well first. It really sets a positive tone for the entire conversation. And then I share where the team member has an opportunity to improve. Now, even better, after the work is complete, ask the person who has done the work how they thought that they did. Ask about what they thought went well. Ask about what would they do differently next time. Align your feedback and support to your team member with their feedback, and then any additional feedback that you identified. I know a lot of emerging leaders will say that they don't have time to provide that level of feedback. Well, my question to you is, do you have time to address the low performance on your team because your team doesn't know if the work that they're doing is meeting expectations? You need to remove that excuse if you don't have time for feedback, because it's a part of your job, as I mentioned earlier. The disciplines of authentic leaders, they connect to every aspect of delegation. And that's why these disciplines are foundational principles for all emerging leaders to master in order to lead high-performing teams. My question to you is, which of these authentic leader disciplines do you need to focus on this week? Which delegation strategy will help you to elevate your team's performance? Now, I encourage you not to apply all of these disciplines or delegation strategies, but rather just begin with one. Get really good at that one, and then, and only then, work on another one. Just make small commitments and focus on one activity at a time and follow through on that commitment. I've found that when you try to do everything at once, you're most likely end up doing nothing, of course, at once. Now, if you can relate to anything that I shared here today, or if you would like to ask me questions, I would love to talk to you. You can schedule a free strategy call at ChristopherRJones.com, or you can put a comment right here and I'll respond. You can also DM me or reach out to me through my LinkedIn profile. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I am hosting a summit for new leaders and emerging leaders. If you would like to get details or learn more about this summit, you can sign up at AuthenticSuccessOnline.com/interest. Just put your information in there and we can schedule a time that works best for you. All I need is 10 participants, and I need your help to fill these 10 participant spots for this summit. So if you want to get your name on the list, you probably need to do it sooner than later, like maybe probably today. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn at I am Christopher Jones. You can find more information and other free resources when you go to ChristopherRJones.com. Hey, I want to thank you for joining us today. Please come back next week for another episode. Next week, we will have another Authentic Leader Live right here on LinkedIn and my YouTube channel.